Hello, music makers. Do you like the sound of these drums here? Good, so do I. It's why they're on probably 6 or 7 of my last releases. And so does A Golden 24, who commented, "Need a tutorial on those disco drums, sound so good." Thank you so much for the compliment. Here is your tutorial, but I warn you now, you're not going to like what I'm about to show you. Let's go. So, how do we get drums to sound like this? Let me show you what's on each part. Here's the kick drum. Nothing on it. Here's the first top loop. Nothing on that. Here's the clap. Untouched. Second top loop. Okay, you caught me. There's a high-pass filter on that one. Here's the congas, the percussion. You guessed it, as someone from further south might say, nothing. So there's probably a few of you distrusting souls watching right now who think, he's got some secret sauce on the drum bus that he's hiding from us. And you got me, I do. Although I'm not sure I would call it secret sauce. There's a high-pass filter and an EQ. Have a listen to the positively insane difference this EQ makes. Well, if you didn't catch on by now, that was sarcasm. It's hardly a world of difference, is it? It's a couple of dB in the mids, but the point is I only made that decision after putting in that music loop. It's not something I can show you that you can copy, because your track will have different frequencies in different places, and a different groove, probably. So now there's only a few of you left who are still so cynical to think that I would leave something on the master bus, which I am not showing you. That must be where the polish and the magic is coming from, right? Sorry, no. It's just a bunch of metering. Those who know the channel know I release all my tracks without any mastering anyway, so that was never going to be the case. So in truth, only half the credit goes to me, because I didn't really do anything to these drums. They already sounded good. But here's a question, should I take any credit at all? Well, yes, this is the true role of a producer. I knew which ones to pick. I'll keep saying this till my dying day, but to paraphrase engineer Robert Scoville, mixing is a listening skill, not an operation skill. I can teach a 10-year-old to use a compressor. What I can't teach them is to hear when it is appropriate to use that compressor. So, if you haven't heard me say it before, you need to hear this. It doesn't matter what fancy box you have, be it analog or plug-in, and it doesn't matter what fancy technique you've learned from all of these wonderful YouTube tutorials. Parallel compression, multiband compression, harmonic exciters. It does not matter. You cannot process your way out of a bad sound selection. If you like the sound of these disco drums, or my tracks in general, that is simply the result of 2 simple concepts. First of all, I knew what I wanted. Second, I had the ear training to find it. Now, I know for some that will be very disheartening. I'm sure you were hoping some purchase or other could save your track. But look at it from the other end of the spectrum. It turns out a great mix isn't going to cost you any money at all if you work on those other 2 things. So let's talk about that, shall we? I was advising someone on Instagram DMs the other day. They told me how they were struggling to use services like Splice, spending far too long looking through the plethora of options and not finding anything useful. And they were asking me, in their words, how to move beyond Splice. Now, I have to admit, this statement puzzled me for a few moments, because that is the exact opposite of my experience. Most of the time, I can find what I want within a few minutes. So what's going on? I think the difference lies in where I said, I can find what I want. The way I use services like sample packs or even presets is I already know what I'm looking for. So it's a case of just going and seeking it out. Whereas those who are struggling with these kind of services tend to be using them in a very different way. What they are browsing for is inspiration. They're effectively doom scrolling. They don't know what they're looking for, so they scroll endlessly, looking for something to jump out at them, which might inspire their next move, be it the start of a track in the first place or the next direction for a track. Now, it's certainly possible to work like this, but think of the dangers. Obviously, there's a high chance of choice paralysis. There's just so many samples and presets these days, it's hard to make a decision sometimes. And the other major problem that runs parallel to this is ear fatigue, or even worse, ear ambivalence. Have you ever asked someone for an explanation on something and got an answer that was far too technical?
The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite, surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing, in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with a panometric fan.
Full of so many technical terms and acronyms that you don't understand that your mind just starts to wander elsewhere and your eyes start to glaze over. This is kind of the ear's equivalent of that. It's one of the many reasons you'll hear professionals talk about the importance of making tracks fast. Obviously, you want to complete as much of the idea as possible while the inspiration is still fresh and exciting in your mind. But there's also a time window where you are physically capable of achieving that before your ears and brain kind of give up. That window does grow over time with experience, but early on you have to be especially conscious of things which eat into that window. Otherwise, before you know it, you've browsed 1,000 presets, they all start to sound the same now, you're bored, you're numb, and now you can't remember what you were going to do with the sound if you found it. Okay, so I've rambled long enough about the problem and how it's not a problem for me because I've got probably a 2-decade head start on you. That's no different to those Dark Souls streamers that just tell you to get good. No, we're better than that here. What can you do? Well, first of all, I would start here. I made a video called 3 Simple Steps, which is just an argument for referencing before the track starts. This is a large part of why I know what I want. Let me talk you through the choice of drums in this disco example. In fact, let's discuss that word first. Disco. Which disco? OG 70s, or the beginning of the electronic disco with Donna Summer and Giorgio Moroder? 90s Daft Punk? Or more recent vibes like New Disco, Purple Disco Machine, etc.? Hopefully your mind is already starting to separate those vibes, because they're all very different, right? That determines what kind of clap we're looking for, what kind of kick, acoustic loops versus electronic, etc. And of course, different grooves. So here's what I was aiming for. There's a great YouTube channel called Flavor Trip. This couple basically travel around, they set up camp, they barbecue, and they DJ. I can't remember which episode it was now, but they performed a set which I was really inspired by. It was kind of disco-like, but it was a lot more chill, outdoorsy, sunsetty kind of vibe than the current crop of harder new disco that's going round. I looked up my favourite tracks from the set, and the general genre tags that kept coming up were summer disco house, soulful house, and soulful disco. So, off I popped to Splice, and the first loop that I really liked in that mood was this one. Nice groove, that one. Not too tough, pretty laid back, but still lots of momentum. Very danceable, especially that backbeat. A nice, strong, semi-realistic clap. A little bit pulled behind the beat for that laid back feel. Now, if you can't hear any of that, I encourage you to go and watch this video. This is a geeky deep dive into the nuances of groove, which I think you'll find really helpful. Because of course, we're not just talking about tone here. I'm not so much interested that this clap has enough at 1 kilohertz or anything like that. This is a mood decision, and groove is obviously essential to that. So that's great, but the only problem I had with this loop is that every kick I chose seemed to be too much. Most typical house kicks seem to be smacking too much at the top when combined with this loop. Or obviously flamming in some way, where the transients don't match up in time, because this is kind of an acoustic loop, right? So that explains my kick decision here. Hear how dull that is? Barely anything on the top, something I would probably never reach for on its own. But auditioned in the context of the main loop I had chosen. This is with the high-pass filter, by the way. Fits nicely. Moving on to the other drums, this second loop I found was a tonal decision. I was looking for a little top-end sizzle to complement the rather soft main loop. Normally that kind of thing comes from open hi-hats or ride cymbals, tambourines maybe, but all those kind of loops were far too energetic and probably harsh in the context of my main loop here. But this one is a nice, soft, tight shaker with lots of top end. There is a very light ride cymbal in the background there as well. Now, this is an ear training thing. To be able to spot those kind of frequencies takes lots of practice. I recommend trying a site like Sound Gym. just use the free tier to get your ears used to active listening. Not sponsored, just one I like. I like the gamification of it. Anyway, back to the loop. There is one problem here. It does have a kick drum in there as well. That makes 3 kick drums now. 2's company, 3's a crowd, as they say. So after a little experimenting, it turns out I preferred the top end from this kick drum complementing my main kick than I did the original loop. So back on the original loop, I have done this. I've done this on the Ableton clip itself with a volume envelope, but you can achieve the same thing with any kind of sidechain plugin, like the free STFU. That's to get the kick out of the way, but we're keeping the main backbeat, obviously. So that's the bulk of the drums done. All I wanted then was some more congas for that disco flavor. Again, it's just a case of auditioning a few and keeping an ear out for that mood. I don't want anything too active, too energetic. I want soft, laid back, groovy. So I found these. There's a nice couple of clave hits in there as well too. Lastly, the only other drum decision in this track was the addition of another clap, but that wasn't obvious until after I'd started putting some music parts in. Once those mid-frequencies started to fill up with various instruments, I started to lose a bit of my favourite part of the original loop, the backbeat. What I originally described earlier as a nice, strong acoustic clap backbeat turned out to be not strong enough. It was getting a bit lost. Could I have mixed my way out of this problem? Maybe sidechaining the middle frequencies out of the way so I could let the clap through? Maybe. But remember how we spoke about speed earlier? Isn't it far faster just to go and find another clap with some supporting mid-frequencies? I thought so. So I found this one. If my original loop has more of a clack, that one has more of a chick kind of sound. Hopefully you get the idea. Onomatopoeias aren't my strong suit. Comment down below what sounds you think those 2 claps make. Meanwhile, let me show you the difference that makes when the music is in. Hear that? Strengthens the backbeat without getting too harsh. Also regarding that backbeat mid-clarity, that's where the EQ decision came from. Because that part of the groove is important, I've used a couple of the mid-bands here to poke it through. Now, as to why I didn't just use the stock EQ, that's got nothing to do with quality, it's more that I wanted to use my ears above my eyes. For tasks like these, I'd rather not look at a frequency display. Because biologically, don't forget, our eyes do rule over our ears. So there's always that risk you might be seduced into making a nice-looking EQ curve instead of the best-sounding one. And that was everything. So, I hope you learned something. If you did, return the favour, like or share or subscribe. There's also a link in the description to buy me a coffee if you're feeling really generous. And until next week, I will see you down there in the comments. Bye-bye.
Girl, don't call my phone. I know where you've been. You like to get messy when you out with your friends.